I wanted to make this video about a recent purchase I made and share some of my thoughts about why I made the purchase and the side effects of the purchase. Anyways, for a little while I've wanted a Fujifilm camera that wasn't a second mortgage on my house and was very high quality. I think I found the right camera that fit that description. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you the Fujica GL690. And this is an absolute behemoth of a camera. People call it the Texas Leica, obviously because it looks like a Leica Q3. And I should probably take this off for you people that love the glass. In all of my research that I've done on medium format cameras, it's led me first to the Mamiya 645 to get the most shots per roll, just for efficiency and cost effectiveness. And then it also led me into, well, how big of an image could you capture? And barring the 6x17 Fujifilm panoramic camera that's absolutely outside of my price range by a Texas mile, is that the phrase? There's no way I could afford the 6x17. So instead I settled for a Fujica GL690. And here's why I don't think it's technically settling to have gone with this camera. In this camera, you're getting a massive 60 by 90 millimeter film image area. And once it gets into those sharper films, you're losing more detail to digital scanning than you would be getting, if that makes sense. But this will allow me to shoot higher ISO film and not have such a harsh grain texture. Something that comes to mind are these Kodak T-Max 3200 photos that they're so unbelievably grainy that I had a hard time deciding what I would use T-Max 3200 on ever again. But I think I've found a camera that could take advantage of that. So the surface area of the film itself is a huge benefit to having this camera. This is a rangefinder camera with parallax correction. If you've watched any other video on YouTube about this camera, you've probably heard that before. But my favorite part is just the way it sounds, the small sound and the satisfying gearbox inside, just because of how simple it sounds. But I'll give you a small little tasty treat right here. So very satisfying. The thing that I found out about this camera as an after the fact, after I had already purchased it, is just how high quality the lens is on this camera. This 100mm f3.5 to f32 is an absolute behemoth in quality. I think the best part about this lens is the unbelievable low amount of chromatic aberration. I am not a trained visual inspector of images, but I, for the most part, cannot notice any chromatic aberration. Longitudinal chromatic aberration, loca, there is none. And it's such a sharp lens, and I can't believe the resolution that I get out of the negatives, even with such a large surface area. One thing that's often talked about on this camera is the shutter speed and aperture rings are reversed. So on the shutter speed ring, you'll go from darkest to brighter, and then brightest to darkest. And this was on purpose so that if you were shooting at 500 f3.5 and you wanted more depth of field in your shot, you could grab both rings like I am right now and twist them at the same time and maintain proper exposure. Let's have a look at some of the images this camera has produced, and we'll see if you think this camera is right for you. So looking at these photos, you'll probably notice that some of them might look a little bit more out of focus than others, and that's just simply because the focusing with this camera is extremely touchy. And if you are out of focus in the slightest, you will be punished for it. And that is a fact of life with this camera, and you just have to learn to live with it. So even though it's really tempting to stop down the camera to f3.5, it is quite the challenge to get it completely in focus. And my best suggestion is that if you intend to pull really shallow focus, you might want to focus on something that has interesting details within that whole focus range that you might be within, just to account for any variance. You don't want to try and focus on a pin needle, is what I'm saying, because 9 times out of 10 you will be out of focus. Moving on to the last part of this video I want to talk about is the ability for this camera to shoot panoramic photos with 35mm film. I haven't tested this very thoroughly. I've only ran one roll of film through it, and that film was expired, so I didn't really give it the best chance in the world. But here are some of those examples, and you can see that it's extremely wide, and the lab I took these to actually didn't have the ability to scan these at their full width. One thing that I found was interesting about this is you get about 15 shots on a 36 exposure roll of 35mm film. It's a lot of numbers to spread out. The plate that I use to adapt to 35mm film might not be the perfect insertion piece. Let me get it for reference. So this is the 35mm adapter plate. Simply enough, all you have to do is pop open the back of your camera, insert the adapter plate, and it's kind of perfect because it's recessed right where it fits, so you can't, it's extremely hard to drop it inside there. So on your film back, you'll push that towards the lens, and then you'll flip from the 120 side over to the 220 side. The reason you would set the pressure plate to the 220 side is because 220 film does not have the backing paper along the whole roll of film, and because of that it is a little bit thinner. 35mm film does not have a backing paper, therefore it is thinner. The reason I suspect that the film, these panoramic shots that I took earlier, are out of focus is because that film was not held completely flat, or it was just barely off of the focal plane. We'll have to test this further in continuation, but that's about it. This is just a few observations about the camera. Later on, when I have more images, maybe I'll do a deep dive into the lens specifically and talk about how the lens characteristics are. As of right now, it's fairly neutral, and that's a good thing. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and stay subscribed. I hope to post a video once every other week. Bye.